And I got about a third of the way up the hill, and she stalled out. So the couple of guys at the bridge and the supply sergeant that was riding with me, they got out and they pushed. We got it started again. Get up the hill about 2/3 of the way, and she stalls out again. And then it was just a matter of push the clutch in, let it rev up, and let them out. So we went the rest of the way up the hill that way. But by that time, nobody in sight, and I didn't know where they was going. So we just go down the road, hoping, finally catch up with them. And so then after that, we went down to Itzbach, and with the Dillingen Bridgehead. Was in direct support of the 90th Division there, and that was in December. And they had one row of houses in Itzbach they couldn't see from across the river. But the Germans were very methodical. Every so often, dropped a row of shells over the hill. And they made me mad, because I'd fixed up the kitchen windows in this one house, and they throwed cabbages through it. And we had also scrounged around in all that row of houses and found enough stuff. We had our Christmas tree set up, all decorated. And then the 21st of December, they had the breakthrough up in Ardennes, and we had to pull back from across the river there. So we had to leave our Christmas tree. And we went up north, across from Merzig, and that's where we stayed until February, I believe it was. We moved a little ways, and while I was there during the Battle of the Bulge, our first sergeant, he says, "Get out there and clean all those bell housings," and they had grease on them. So we cleaned all the bell housings, put light oil on them like he wanted. Next day he comes in and says, "Get out there and get that rust off in them bell housings." So we go out, clean the rust off, put the grease back on. And he got after me. I had a 12-volt radio, and I had two 6-volt batteries in the Jeep. One would get too high a charge, and the other would be low charge, where it was running the starter. And the batteries were getting old. I'd have to run the Jeep quite a bit to charge them up while it was just setting. So the first sergeant got after me for revving my engine up, so I quit. So we moved about 4 or 5 miles, I think it was, from there, and stayed down another place for a couple of days. And then we left there, and we got up around the corner, and they had a route marker there telling us to go that way, and he yells at me, he says, "Hey, your Jeep's on fire." Well, we landed, we come back on a victory ship. They spent more time writing their names on the plates than they did weld them together. And so we landed the 10th, I believe it was, in Newport News. And then we got to Chicago, and where I came out of the Army was just one barracks between it and the one I went in, at Grant. And went in Chicago, and I caught that train, supposed to leave at 8 o'clock in the evening, and only we didn't have any engine. And at midnight, we still didn't have an engine. And I think it was about 1 o'clock when they finally got an engine. I was asleep before that. But I sent a telegram home to Miriam, and it was just by a fluke. The station agent had to go back over to the depot for something, and he got it. And so they knew I was coming in. But it was 5 o'clock in the morning when we got here, instead of midnight.
And you were able to sleep?
And Miriam and her sister were there waiting for me.
I'll be all right. Well, thank you, Victor. Roland?
My name is Roland Spencer. and serial number 20614693, which I'll never forget, and I had the rank of corporal. I went in the service March 5th, 1941. Left from Galesburg up here with 100 Battery A, 123rd Field Artillery, 33rd Division. We went to Camp Forest, Tennessee, March 5th, 41. I guess probably I was one of the first groups that left here. I volunteered to go. I was going to be drafted in the summer, so they need some replacements. And so I volunteered to leave with the group here in Galesburg. We stayed at the Armory for about a week, and we marched down to the depot, CB&Q depot, and got on the train that took us right into Camp Forest. And brand new camp, so we had to do a lot of sidewalk building and things like that, which Ralph remembers. I don't know if we had the sidewalks all built when he come or not. But
Did they ever build any?
huh? But things was a muddy mess down there. And I was on the Arkansas and Louisiana maneuvers during 41. We went down into Texarkana and had a lot of rain that year. I remember that. Wake up every morning with a bed wet. And then we come back off of that, and next spring, I believe it was 87th Division moved into Camp Forest, and they moved us out what we called Camp Tick, out in the woods. We was in tents, and we was there a while.
Why did you call it Camp Tick?
Well, yeah, pardon?
Why did you call it Camp Tick?
Because there was a lot of wood ticks. Brush wood ticks. I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit.
Now, why did they move you out there?
Well, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit.
Okay.
I was in the service from March to December for Pearl Harbor. And we was at Camp Forest when they hit Pearl Harbor. And I remember that distinctly. It was on a Sunday. And within a day or two, we was a square division then.
Now, what's a square division?
A square division, and they streamlined us down to what they call a triangular division. You had the 1st Battalion and the 2nd Battalion, and then you had, they had a regiment, regiment of guns. We had 155 millimeter Hausers, which is a 6-inch gun, separate loaded ammunition. You shoved in the shell, then you had the powder charge and the primer. Everything was separate. And those projectiles will weigh, what I'm calling projectiles, a shell, they weigh 100 pounds. And it was full of TNT. And there was, and even the fuse was separate. You had an M46 fuse, which was a minute it hit, it exploded. And they had an M47 fuse, which was delayed fuse. And then you had the time fuse, where you set the time. You wanted to go off in an hour, it would go off in an hour, or 30 minutes, or whatever you wanted to explode. So within a night or two, just a couple of nights after they hit Pearl Harbor, they come in the middle of the night, turn the lights on, told the fellow on this side of me, get your clothes, back, you're going. And they skipped me and went with the next guy. I don't know how it come they skipped me. They thought I was too little, I guess. I don't know. But that's the way they did. They had this, well, in the fall, we had let the 28-year-olds out. And I think about September, anyone who was over 28 got to come back.
Come back
They
to...
discharged them.
Ah,
Temporarily, I guess, because they brought them all back after they hit Pearl Harbor. And so that made the whole division was short of troops. And they made there was 2 colonels colonel, the 1st Battalion and the 2nd Battalion. And they flipped the coin to see which battalion would go. They wanted troops to go down under right away.
One of those red tape things.
Yeah, and the 2nd Battalion lost, so took the 2nd Battalion and the 1st Battalion stayed. And so they needed to get up to full strength, and they robbed the 1st Battalion to put them in the 2nd Battalion. And I know the next day, I helped load cars, we loaded railroad cars, and they took all of our rifles away from us and gave them to the 2nd Battalion because they didn't have enough rifles to go around. And they had walk guard with clubs after that until we got new rifles. We were short.
Gosh.
Japan didn't know it, but they could have took us if they had this equipment because we didn't have no equipment. And it was probably a month or two before we got replaced with new rifles and things like that. And then this new division, in the spring there, the new division wanted to take ours, and they moved us out to this, what I call Camp Tick. We put up tents out there. We were out there a while, and they called on our outfit to go to Fort Sill to fire our big guns for the officers' candidate school down there. And we convoyed down, and we was down there. I know we was down there on the 4th of July in '42. We was down there firing it. We didn't take any time off, and no Sundays or nothing. And I suppose we fired probably for 30 days down there. And then we come back to that Camp Tick again. And then I think it was in the fall, August or September, we took all our equipment and we loaded up down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, went to Railhead down there, and we went to Fort Lewis, Washington. It took us a week. We took the whole train, had the whole train, and went up to Fort Lewis, Washington. I stayed there until the spring of '43. And we went to Mojave Desert, California, and took desert training to go to Africa. And we thought we were all set to go to Africa because took this machine gun fire and crawling underneath the barbed wire and stuff like that. And people shooting over your head. And I know there was one fellow that seen a rattlesnake, and he jumped up and he got mowed down, he got shot down. And because there was a steady stream of bullets going over, and you could see them because there's tracer bullets. You could see the bullets.
Now, I explained that. I don't know what a tracer bullet is.
Tracer bullet, it shoots a stream of fire.
Oh.
And then the war got over in Africa while we was there at the Mojave Desert. And so they changed their orders. Old Patton run them out of Africa, the Patton you're talking about. And we went Camp Stoneman, California, what's the port of embarkation. And they kept us around there, look at our teeth, see if our teeth was okay and all this and that, and give us another physical. They did weed a few people out. And they marched us up to some port, and I just don't remember the port it was. Anyway, we got on there, and they were just room to set our barracks bag on there, and just room to sit down on that thing. And we went down to Frisco to load, and got on I remember the ship I got on, President Tyler. It was a big old ship. And
About approximately how many men do you think got on that?
gosh, I don't know. It was a long one, but they had a destroyer on each side of it. I remember that. and we went over to Pearl Harbor, and we stayed in there about all day, and they let us get off and walk a little bit. You know, I thought you see a sailor go this way, you'd think he's half drunk, but really he wasn't. He'd done that to balance himself on the ship, because that's the way I done when I got off that ship and walked around. It was 8 days, and it was kind of an old slow ship. And we waited. They had jeeps and everything else out in that hole of that ship. I don't know how they got so much stuff in there, but they were really dragging her out. And then we got back on the ship, and we went over to Kauai. That's the most northern island, the Hawaiian Islands. And had gun emplacements there to guard. The other outfit had moved in, and we was replacing them to guard the island. And I was there until, I think, we left. We sailed July the 8th, 1943. I don't know what I mentioned that, or I'm going to repeat. July 8th, 1943. And I was there until about January 44, and there was a tank outfit over at Oahu Island. That's where Pearl Harbor is. And they was needing replacements. And I went over there, and I got out of the 33rd, was with the 4th Armored Group. And they sent troops to, well, I was in headquarters. Well, I went over there, and I remember we went to 13th Replacement Depot. And yeah, I don't know, there's 500 or 600 guys in that barracks, and they said, fall out. And they fell out, and they was all lined up down through there. And then the captain come down the line, and he said, I'd like to have you, you, and you. And there was 4 or 5 of us that he picked. I don't know how he come to pick me, but I guess he got my record or something, thought he needed me. We got in the Jeep, and away we went. And I stayed there. I was in the artillery. I was a gunner in there. So maybe he thought he needed a gunner because they put me in a tank, and I was a gunner in the tank. Gunner and radio operator and assistant driver, or whatever you name. You had to know all the positions on the tank. And we sent troops down to Marshall Islands, to invade, and to the Mariana Islands. And out the headquarters company, we just had light tanks, but the others had the Sherman tank, the bigger tank. They had a 75 millimeter on them. And the headquarters stayed right there in Oahu. And they would go down and enforce other divisions. And they would call for so many tanks, and they went down. They would go down in the battle, and they'd come back. And I think August 26, 1944, I was using a blowtorch. And I was pumping it, it got down, act like it was low on the air or something. And I was pumping it up, and the thing blew up. And I don't know what happened, but there was fire and gasoline shot all over my clothes. Burnt my clothes right off of me. And next thing I was trying to put it out, slap it out in my hands, and of course I thought I wasn't getting anywhere there, and I started to run. And I thought, what am I running for? This fire's flying up above my head. And I laid down and started to roll on the ground. And that's the best thing I ever done. They come with blankets and threw over me and rolled me up with blankets. And first thing I knew, the ambulance had me in they took me to dispensary, and doctor come out there, and he gave me a shot of morphine, and he says, and he put a in the tag. So then they took me up to the operating room, and when they got the bandage off that, my leg was green, and one doctor gave the other the dickens over it, but they just fired back and forth like they're doing Morrison, you know. And they were trying to take that bandage off, and that doctor says, "What are you sweating about?" And they never give me nothing, you know, nothing for pain. He says, "What are you sweating about?" I said, "Let me pull on you like that you'll find out." And then I think penicillin's the only thing that saved my leg, because they give my leg a bath. That's when penicillin was new. It was brand new then. And they give my leg a bath twice a day in penicillin. And I think that's the only thing that ever saved me. And then they had to do skin grafting. So I was in the hospital from August to January. And I was healing up then, beginning to heal up. And the doctors thought I wouldn't be much good to them over there, so they put me on a plane and flew me back to San Francisco. Well, there was some more guys that was burns. I was in the burn unit, and I was the only non-com in the bunch, I guess. They took me out there, and he says, and he didn't tell me I was going to the States the night before. He said, go get your clothes, get an issue of clothes. You're going back to the States. And that was January 45. And so they sent me back to San Francisco, and I was in a hammock all the way across, you know, bed where you could look out. Come in the Francisco home, went into a big hospital there, and they said, we went in the kitchen, and they said, "You can have anything you want to eat." They had all kinds of stuff there. And the first thing I seen was a quart of milk. And I grabbed that, and I downed that before I stopped. And I was there until the next morning, and they come around and told me, and says, "You're going to go to convalescent hospital at Camp Atterbury, Indiana." And it turned foggy, and said, "Well, we're going to have to delay it for a day." Well, and about 11 o'clock, the fog began to lift, and they said, "Well, we're going to go." So we ate dinner early and went out on the plane. We flew. They had to make several stops. We flew into Kansas, and we stayed all night in Kansas. And then we flew from there. We stayed on. They wouldn't let the hospital plane fly at night. I mean, in the States here anyway. If you're flying across the ocean, it'd be different, but in the States they wouldn't let the hospital fly. So we stayed all night at barracks there, and the next day we flew into Indianapolis. And they took me down there to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, to convalescent hospital there. And
Excuse me, Ron, I've got it up.
then the doctors interviewed us and looked us over and decided what they're going to do with us. And this one doctor says, "You may get discharged." Well, so he says, "Come back, we're having a board of doctors tomorrow," and there were about 5 of them. And they decided then that I would get limited duty in the States, and with a 30-day furlough, which sounds real good. And then I got a 30-day furlough, and then went to Miami Beach, Florida for recuperation, what they call a recuperation. went to Miami Beach, Florida, and from there on the train back to, up to Fort Sheridan, and they had German prisoners up at Shanahan, Illinois, in an OCC camp, and so I got a job guarding them, and they worked them in Joliet at the chemical plant and in the shipyards. And you'd take as high as 50 and 60 German prisoners, one guy. But they didn't want to go away. They didn't want to run away. About the only thing, a lot of them couldn't talk, some of them could. And if they was working, and your duty was to, if one of them failed to work, then you were supposed to report him when he went back. And they had trouble with an old German one day. I don't know what was wrong with him, but he just mad as the dickens. And they called me up there, and I said, you either work for bread and water when you go back to camp. That was the work we were supposed to give him. And no, he did just sold. So we went back. I pointed him out. He was the guy that wouldn't work. So they put him on bread and water for a couple of days. He's ready to work then. And I was laid a little while, and I got out October 16th. 1945.
Well, I'm John S. Snare, Sergeant, 367777943 serial number. And I went in when I was 32, I think it was, in service. And I was discharged when I was 34, I believe it was. I'm not sure, but they're pretty darn close. I was in the 83rd Infantry Division, as an Ohio Division, and I trained at Croft, South Carolina. And Juanita came down, and I couldn't get a pass to get out, so I got out, got caught going back, so I went long enough, I was a cook. They gave me a cook spec number. So I cooked. Huh?
Did you peel a lot of potatoes?
No, I didn't have to. No, I was smart. I made pancake batter and donut batter and got the peas ready, or beans, whatever they had. Didn't even have to do the dishes. KPs, German KPs did that.
The potatoes and the dishes.
And let's see, I don't know. But I was, like I say, I was 32, and they said, no, you're too old. But they'd give me a test, and I passed it. Huh? I passed everything just fine. It was